This is the Global Mom Show, Episode 3. Hi, I'm Mary Grace Otis, and you're listening to the Global Mom Show. Do you love to travel, learn about other cultures, or open your home to people from around the world? Maybe you live and work abroad. Maybe you used to, or maybe you wish you did now. Maybe you live in a big city with lots of opportunities for global connection, or maybe you live in a small town like I do, and you want to find ways to connect yourself and your kids with a global view of life. Well, whatever the case, the Global Mom Show will encourage and inspire you to live a global life wherever you are and teach your kids to do the same. Each week, I'll connect you with moms around the world who are living globally minded lives as educators, authors, immigrants, expats, development workers, business owners. Well, you get the idea. I can't wait to share their stories with you and to hear yours as well. Here we go. Today, we welcome Katie Chandler to the show. Katie has 2 decades of international development experience. She's taught English in Ecuador and worked in Bolivia for 4 years as a project director for Edda Projects, an NGO based in Tacoma, Washington. She also served as the director of training for a nonprofit that serves the poor globally through safe water solutions and health and hygiene education. And in 2014, Katie joined Bridge of Life as their senior program manager in Denver, Colorado. Katie's responsible for monitoring and evaluation, program design and implementation, and hosting medical missions around the globe. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you.
First of all, introduce yourself and your family to our listeners.
Well, as you said, my name is Katie Chandler. I live in the foothills of Colorado in a small town called Golden with my sweet husband, Spencer. We just got married in May, and my 8-year-old curious and compassionate daughter, Koa.
Great. Well, I remember the first time that Katie and I met. We were new at graduate school, and we were sitting in the living room of our newly rented apartment on Chapin Street in Brattleboro, Vermont, that we both had just signed a lease for without knowing who we were going to be sharing the house with. And I had only been home a few days from India, and Katie had only been home from Ecuador for a few days. Both of us had driven across the country to start our year of grad school, and we just immediately clicked as we talked about our experiences abroad and the current state of culture shock that I think we found ourselves in. Do you remember that, Katie?
I do. What a great memory.
Yeah, it was fun, and we had a great time at grad school and just living together. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, and I'm really excited because I get to hear on everything that you've been doing the last few years that we have not been in such good communication and touch. So tell us about what you're doing now work-wise with your newest project, and tell us about that.
Well, right now, I work for an organization called Bridge of Life. We're headquartered here in Denver, Colorado. We have a mission to improve community health, wellness, and vitality. So historically, we worked a lot on chronic kidney disease education, prevention, and treatment. It's pretty unbelievable that in many parts of the resource-poor countries, when a person has chronic kidney disease, there simply is no access to dialysis treatment. And so we launch new clinics and upgrade current clinics that have the goal of serving the underserved and providing this life-saving treatment to those that normally would die without it, without being able to afford it. So my role is to manage the primary care program, but I also oversee the monitoring and evaluation of all 3 programs and do a lot of support with program design and implementation. What I love about my job is that it allows me to travel about bi-monthly internationally to support program assessments and then also to lead medical missions.
Okay. And tell us about the medical missions. You were just in Gautemala, is that right?
Yeah. So we were founded by a very large healthcare company called DaVita that has over 50,000 employees in the United States and beyond. A lot of their work really is in dialysis clinics, but then they have also expanded to primary care. And so that allows our nonprofit to kind of tap into their network of employees. So physicians, nephrologists, doctors, nurses, medical professionals, and we form groups to empower local staff, train local staff, and just support some technical expertise to the communities and hospitals and clinics that we serve. And so I work in kind of in the link between forming these medical mission teams with teammates from DaVita Healthcare Partners, and then providing these missions to the clinics and hospitals that we serve internationally.
Okay. Now, on this show, we like to talk to moms around the world about how they stay connected with global work or stay connected with speaking different languages, how they keep their kids connected with the world, and how they teach them about the world. Now, you have been a single mom for several years, and you also traveled a lot and lived with your daughter in Bolivia. How does that work now with you traveling and with your daughter? How do you work that out?
It's not easy. It is not easy to find the balance. Luckily, I have my wonderful husband, Spencer, who supports me and Koa a lot when I do these missions. I think having them invested in understanding the work that I do helps a lot, but it's not easy, and it takes a lot of understanding and support from my family to make it work for sure.
And I mean, one thing I've seen with you is just a commitment to staying involved in the international work that you really love. You know, you could have given it up in several places along the way, but you've really just been intentional about seeking out jobs that are using your skills and your background. Can you tell us about your earliest memory of learning about other cultures and being exposed to a different worldview and how that might have started you on this course?
Yeah, I think ever since I was a very, very young girl, I always had a compassion to get involved in the community. I grew up in a small suburb of Chicago that did not have a lot of diversity, to be honest. When I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for undergrad, I started my volunteer work, I think, took me to opportunities where I had to learn about different cultures. So I remember volunteering at an organization called Early Start, where I taught English to parents of international students and helped them to get more invested in their kids' education. I also volunteered at at the Wisconsin State Public Defender's Office, and just really opened my eyes up to different cultures and how the legal system and the education system impacted different cultures in different ways. And so I think that was when I really started having a passion for speaking Spanish and the Latino culture specifically. And I remember going into a student counselor in my undergrad and asking them for new opportunities to get even more involved. And they told me about an opportunity to go to Mexico. I didn't have the Spanish that I needed in order to do that trip, but somehow I convinced a professor to allow me to go, and I was able to go to Oaxaca, Mexico, and work with street children as an assistant teacher. And it was the opportunity I had that really planted a seed for this continuous work.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 8 weeks, and it was the first time I ever went abroad. I grew up in Chicago, like I said, and my family had a small cottage in Wisconsin, like so many Illinois families do. And that was our trip, and that was my life. And so I really never had anything beyond that. And so going to Mexico, I can't tell you what an eye-opening experience to recognize and be aware that the rest of the world danced to this different beat. I don't think I ever felt more passionate and curious and alive than I did for those 8 weeks.
And then when you came back, how did that change the trajectory of where you were going?
I like I said, it did plant a seed. Soon after, I think that was my sophomore year of college. Right after my sophomore year of college, I spent that summer in Mexico. My senior year, I spent in Spain on another travel abroad trip, and then I left school for a semester and traveled all throughout Europe, and continue to have just this enormous passion to see the world. Straight out of school, I then went 2 years in Ecuador, teaching at a college called the Universidad de Aloya Faro in Manta, Ecuador. And then, as you know, and talked about my trips to Bolivia and my time there, I think I would come home and work and save just enough money to have my next international experience.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about your time in Ecuador. And, you had so many stories from that time that you told me because that's where you were just getting back from when we met. Tell me about, what was your life like there and how was that place for you in your identity development and that time in your life?
You know, I spent about 2 years, just over 2 years in Ecuador, and I don't think I could. I think that was like the single most fun period of my entire life. I was teaching at a university. I worked 3 days on, 3 days on, 4 days off, and so I just had this wonderful work-life balance where I got to travel and surf and take salsa lessons and just immerse myself in the country as a young, in my early 20s. And I had just so much fun getting to know my students and families and culture and food, and just really traveling throughout that country, seeing the Galapagos Islands, and I swear every inch of that beautiful country. So it was just an amazing period of my life.
And I remember you telling me a story about you visiting a friend whose family owned a pizza parlor, and one day you were sitting with the family folding pizza boxes. Tell me, I probably got some of that wrong, but tell me a little bit about that story and about what you learned that day.
Yeah, I think that was my aha moment in cultural immersion. Like you said, I was visiting a family. I had recently arrived to Ecuador, and it was one of the first friends I made. Her name was Erica. And I remember I went with a bunch. I was part of a program called World Teach, and Teach had many other teachers from around the United States go on this program. And once we got to Ecuador, we all kind of went to our own cities and to do our own jobs. And that's very same weekend, a lot of the teachers were getting back together to kind of talk about how their first month or two in their city was. And I was very tempted to go to that trip with all the other American teachers, but instead I thought I would travel back with Erica back to her hometown to spend the weekend with her family instead. And so on my first night there, I woke up before Erica did, and I could hear her family folding pizza boxes just eating and talking and working in their dining room. And I went downstairs, and they were folding pizza boxes. They had a tiny little pizza restaurant, a little Italian restaurant outside of their home, just a few tables. And so when people would finish up their pizza, they would put them in these homemade to-go boxes. And I thought, oh, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to help Erica's family with this project. And so I sat down and I started working. And before I knew it, I had developed a way to fold these pizza boxes as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I remember once I got my strategy all worked out, I cleared my throat, and in the best Spanish I could, which was not very good at the time, said to Erica's family, I have an idea, check this out. I have come up with a plan to fold pizza boxes very quickly and very efficiently. And I swear with my strategy, you can just, crank out more pizza boxes than you guys are doing. And I remember Erica's dad just started laughing at me. And he said, you are so Americana. You're such a gringa. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm speaking Spanish and I'm here with Erica and her family, and I'm immersing myself in this culture, and I'm being called a gringa. And he told me to sit back and to relax and to take in the moment, that it wasn't something that was being rushed, that this was kind of the way that they bonded on Saturday mornings. And this is what they cherished. And I remember looking up and seeing the family, and there were kids sitting on adults' laps, and they were eating and they were working together, and they they didn't care how quickly they did it. And I realized that my American way, coming in and, coming up with this system to work independently and to crank out these boxes as quickly as possible, was so part of my culture. And it was in that moment that I realized, I think, the importance of adapting in real time to the culture that you're trying to be a part of, and kind of letting go of your old approaches of doing things and taking on tasks and being willing to learn and change and adapt to their sense of space and their sense of time. So it's just one of those, like I said, aha moments where I learned how to kind of take in those experiences and make sure that I was more aware of who I was, because being there and speaking the language sometimes is not enough.
Yeah. I love that story. I think it just really represents for so many of us who've traveled how we try to understand things, and sometimes you just have to have somebody else interpret it for you and say, "No, that's not what we're doing here. We're not getting at that." So,
Yes.
I love that story. Now, tell me about after graduate school. You went to Bolivia and you went there to do your field work, and describe some of the things that you saw in Bolivia and the people that you worked with there, and what was the main purpose of your project there.
Well, I went to Bolivia with a small grassroots organization called Edda Projects. I ended up working years and years with Edda Projects. Originally, they did a lot of women's projects, so income generation classes, microfinances, and they also had what is called an apoyo escolar, so an after-school program for kids, and a feeding center that was intended to allow the women to kind of, have the opportunity and the time to get more involved in these microfinance programs to be able to start their own businesses or, take on different projects and not have to worry about putting lunch on the table or feeding or supporting their kids in their education. It was a pretty amazing experience. The first time I went to Bolivia, I went to do my practicum with SIT, and I lived in a very rural, kind of peri-urban, but very rural in our standards, neighborhood, and where chickens and horses roam freely, dirt streets. And I remember being very struck by the number of single moms raising a number of children on very little education. And I was just in awe of their perseverance and commitment, and all that they took on.
And then what was your role there as you went back after your thesis? You
Yeah.
had presented your thesis, had a baby, then you decided to go back to Bolivia and live there for a while. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the first time I went, I was a program manager at this Comedor, which is a dining hall in Apoyo Escolar, which was the education support for the kids. During the time that I was back in the United States after I had COA, I was living in Denver, and Edda Projects actually changed their mission to work in more rural areas and more in the water and sanitation sector, which I thought was very exciting. And so when they invited me back, it was kind of to grow the staff and the programs to really launch this new mission. And so I went back as a full-time program director, and the work was incredible, supporting WASH programs in these rural areas. It was a wonderful opportunity to expose COA, my daughter, to rural Bolivia. My work was a lot in these communities, doing community meetings and meetings with women and kids. And so it was really easy to bring COA along with me to a lot of these meetings and community outings. And people were always so willing and eager to help out with COA. And so she just kind of played with the kids in the area. And some of my best memories of COA, I can remember one time she just rode a horse with a man while he plowed the fields for hours. I have a picture of him in my living room of COA kind of sleeping on this man. But really, really just great memories of COA just, hanging out in these communities.
And how old was she when you moved back to the
She
States?
was 4 when we moved back. So she was just under 18 months when we went to Bolivia, when I returned to Bolivia with Koa, and then just had turned 4 when we came back to the States.
Wow. So, I mean, she was speaking Spanish and everything as.
Yeah, Spanish was definitely Koa's first language during that time.
Mhm. And how has that been now that she's back in the US? What kind of changes has she had to make or adjust to?
It's Koa's adapt. I mean, Koa's adaptable, and I think that comes from the time in Bolivia so much. Spanish is a struggle when we came back to the United States, and I don't know if something happened in school or what, but it was one day to the next where she really wanted to start speaking English. Um, I had never spoken Spanish with Koa because she was in school and she was out in the communities. And I had support from this wonderful woman, Mirna, who was part of the Women's Project the first time I went to Bolivia, who helped me as Koa's nanny, and she was amazing with 5 children as well that were constantly in our home. So Koa had all these outlets to speak Spanish, and I was kind of her only outlet to speak English. And so I never had developed that habit of speaking Spanish with Koa. Um,
Mm.
and so when we came back, it's been a challenge. I remember when, she went to kindergarten in first grade in a Montessori school, and I had the opportunity of setting up a Spanish club at the school, and really trying to find creative ways to keep Spanish in her life. But it's something that I keep saying we have to improve on. She understands a lot still in Spanish, but not as eager to speak it, and it's been a challenge to keep that part of her everyday life.
Yeah. Have you read the Third Culture Kids book?
I have not.
Okay. I was just wondering if, I don't know all the details about it, but I was wondering if she has some of those tendencies. And there's a lot of positives about, being able to adapt, like you said, and fit in lots of different places. So it might be interesting for you to get a hold of that. I'll put the link in the show notes for anybody else who hasn't heard of it to find a copy. And it's like a huge volume with a lot of information that's really great about kids adjusting to different cultures and
Wonder.
moving around and that kind of thing. So, um, what were some of the cultural ideas surrounding children in Bolivia and that you noticed in the United States when you came back?
Um,
Because I've never been to Bolivia, so I'm really just kind of curious about that culture.
we lived in a small town and went and then I worked in these rural communities. I think it's different in the United States and in Bolivia. I think in Bolivia, kids um, tend not to have the creativity, the space for creativity that we give kids here. They definitely have less choices and options. I think kids in general in Bolivia are a lot more obedient. I see children. I always was amazed to see kids Koa's age at the time just sleeping in on a guayo all day while their mother sold at the market. I thought, gosh, I couldn't make Koa do that if I tried.
Yeah.
I think though life is a lot simpler there. I take these people on medical missions, and I always am surprised that one of the things that I hear so frequently with these Americans going internationally, these physicians or medical workers, is that they want to save people from the impoverished communities where we are, and take them back with them or something like that. And I think that it's there are challenges of raising kids in both places, and going from Bolivia to the United States, I just really got a good understanding that these challenges are just different. In Bolivia on a daily basis, we dealt with things like parasites. I'll never forget the first time Mirna, Koa's nanny, said, Koa has parasites. And I thought, how do you know? And she said, go look at her in her diaper. And it was pretty obvious that Koa had parasites. Lice, fungus, things like that were part of the constant. Sometimes I felt kind of alone in those challenges. And parenting is a little bit different, I think, in Bolivia as far as, what we hope for our kids, or maybe the punishment or incentives that we give our kids. And so I had a hard time sometimes connecting with other moms. But at the same time, like I said, life is so much simpler. There isn't that anxiety that I think so many mothers feel here as we raise our kids. I remember going from Bolivia to a mom's group, and I was sitting around this mom's group, and they were talking about, what school is your child going to, and what stroller are you using, and what's
Is this a mom's group in the
in
US?
the United States. And I
Yeah.
remember feeling so much pressure suddenly. And I thought, oh my gosh, Koa just ran in these communities, and I never thought about what she was wearing, or, all these different things that, you come here, and there's this heightened sense of anxiety, I think, raising kids here, and this kind of judgment moms put on moms and people put on moms, that, there was a sense of freedom, I think, in Bolivia, but it's different. I think it's just different. And, both come, like I said, with some challenges, but I don't think one is good and one is bad.
Yeah. Now, when you came back to the US, you still stayed connected with Edda Projects. And tell me about those years when you were working in Washington.
Yeah, well, we stayed in Washington for about 2 years, where I worked in fund development for Edda Projects. During that time, Koa and I think we made 2 visits back to Bolivia, each time staying for about a month. So Koa would take a leave of absence, essentially, from her school in the States, and then go back to her school in Bolivia. And so uh, I think it was about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, we decided to move to Colorado, and we did that for a number of reasons, being closer to family, and also I met my now husband, Spencer. But even when we moved back to Colorado, I continued working for Edda Projects for about another year. At first, I was full time, and then I was part time while I worked with another Golden-based organization called Healing Waters. But when I was offered the position with Bridge of Life, I think it was just time for a change, and I was excited for the opportunities to travel to different parts of the world that Bridge of Life afforded me. But Edda Projects continues to stay very near and dear to me. The director of Edda Projects is one of my greatest friends, and I think I will always admire and support their grassroots approach for doing community development.
Yeah, I would love to put links to these nonprofits in the show notes for everyone, because I think so often, when we're in the States, we just don't know who's doing good work other places. And so many times you hear these reports of big things, but you wonder if they're really true or if that's really happening. Can you really trust that your money is going to the right place? And I just think it's great to have a personal connection with a place. So I would love to get that information so that other people can, connect with them and support them in any way.
Absolutely. That would be
So,
great.
yeah. Now, when you were taking Koa out of school for a month at a time, how did other people respond to that? Was everyone like, "Oh, this is great," or was there any voices in your life that were saying, "Well, she's going to miss out," or "This is not a good experience"? What was that like?
I think for the most part, people were very, very supportive. At the time, Ko was in kindergarten and first grade. And so I feel like, it was young enough where she could miss school without it being a big deal from the teacher or the directors. Ko went to a Montessori school that was had a big emphasis on international work, and so I think that they definitely saw the value in it. I think, if anything, it was most hard on Koa, and that would be just the difference between her Montessori school in Tacoma, Washington, which, was under the Montessori structure where kids, had a lot of space.
Independent,
Yes.
yeah.
And then going to Bolivia, where she went to a public school, and it was pretty top down, and you sit and you write in the lines, and it's cursive and it's rulers, and I think that was hard on Koa. And maybe it was because she was just starting in preschool when she was in Bolivia, but I didn't, or because of the young age and just the the more creativity and freedom in the classroom at that age. But I really felt those differences taking her from the United States back to Bolivia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see how that would be challenging. You mentioned that it's difficult to find ways to continue to speak Spanish where you are. What are some of the other things that you're doing just to keep that idea of traveling and learning about other cultures? What are some of the things that you're doing with COA to keep that alive in your home?
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, as a working mom and then a daughter that's in soccer and basketball, it's not easy, and it's something that I'm intentional about and always trying to strengthen. So, coming back from a mission and telling her about our work, my work, and showing her pictures and having her understand on the globe and where I went and what I was doing, I think is part of it. We have decided family rule starting in 2016 is that we'll pick one place that I go each year and make sure that Koa and Spencer come along and are part of that work. But Koa I think in her own right, has really developed an appreciation for getting out in the community. We do a couple of different volunteer services. One of the things we do is bring dinner to an organization that is kind of a safe house for abused women and their kids, and provides them an opportunity for 1 month to kind of get back on their feet. And so we provide, we go there and have dinner, and Koa's like, it's my time to be a play, to be a play date for these kids, and she does great. And so I think just making sure that those kind of opportunities are nourished is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think it is important? I mean, what's your overarching kind of philosophy about what you want Koa to learn as she looks at the world and moves into her future?
Yeah, if you asked Koa this, I think she would say, that we all are people and that we all have the same hearts. She always she always says that. But to be good to people and to see them as her brothers and sisters, and to be passionate about anything that she does in the world, and to advocate for what she believes is right. I think it's really important that Koa is exposed to different cultures and different languages, and to kind of have that passion to not only know what she believes in, but to advocate for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Are there more opportunities in Golden for the advocacy for you guys,
And
or
Golden is tough. Golden's a small, beautiful town that's nestled in the foothills. It doesn't offer the diversity that I hoped it would. But Denver is pretty close and has, I think, a lot more opportunities for her to get involved. Prior to taking the job with Bridge of Life, I taught English at a small organization in the evenings, and that was a great opportunity for Koa as well, because I was able to put her in the same classes, or in the same kind of daycare situation as my students would put their kids. And so that room was filled with many, many languages and a lot of diversity. And then she got to kind of hang out with those students for 2 days a week for 2.5 hours. But again, the older our kids get, I think those things become harder as they get involved in sports and all these other things that that make it more difficult to have
the
those
time
the
to have
time.
the time to do everything? Yeah, I'm finding that even just with little ones, it's like just having them be gone all day at school, then you have to come home and do a sport and have dinner and take a bath and go to bed and you're done. So
I know.
you really have to incorporate it into everything, like with through books and music and food and all of those types of things, and not have it be a separate thing that you have to do. Like learn about the world is a total separate category from regular life. So that's neat.
Absolutely.
Um, I remember one thing that you were talking about when we were in grad school just one day, and you just said, "Man, if everyone would just raise good kids, we could just all we just would all get along."
Wouldn't
And
that be great?
it's like such a simple sentiment. I think your grandmother told you that, and I know hundreds and thousands of grandmothers have said it all around the world. But it's just wonderful to hear that that's what you're doing with Koa. And that's what really this show is about. If we can all just raise good kids who can listen to each other and learn from each other and understand each other, then we really can, connect and make the world a better place. In my perspective, a global mom is somebody who loves to learn about other cultures and connect with the world around her and live in a way that respects diversity and uniqueness of people and cultures across the globe. That's sort of a definition that I've put out there for what a global mom is. When you hear the words global mom, what do you think of?
Oh, well, I love your definition, Grace. I couldn't agree more. I think, a global mom is someone who provides her family with the opportunity for exposure to the world, for new cultures and languages, and that really promotes curiosity of people and places, that promotes kind of a recognition and maybe even more importantly, of value to what's beyond our little corner of the world. And that really, I think I would, that a mom that shows that there are these like ripples of actions that we can take within our own community and beyond, that really makes change possible and that makes positive relationships possible, and that just, raises their kids to strengthen relationships globally and within their own community as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that we've dealt with all the big world issues, we are going to move into the short answer part of the show. So I ask you a series of short questions that you can answer with short and sweet answers.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. What is your favorite place to travel with a child?
I'm going to have to say Bolivia. Well, with my child is Bolivia. It's home. It's home. And we have friends that are family there. And it's a home away from home for us.
Do you get to go back very often now?
I haven't had the opportunity to go back in about a year and a half, and I need to change that. But there are just such sweet spots that I am craving for with Koa. And I think, I think there's beautiful places all over the country, but for us, it's going home.
Yeah. What is the worst cultural faux pas you have made that you remember?
I think you've already made me admit that when I told him about when I told you about my pizza story and how I tackled that task. But no, I probably have more than that. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I went around for months and months saying "estoy embarazada" when I wanted to say I'm embarrassed, which really means I'm pregnant, and I would laugh and tell.
Oh no.
that was a pretty big one too.
Yeah. And the worst one is probably ones that we don't even know.
I know. Those are still lingering.
Yeah. People still think of us and those. Okay, what's your favorite food in your most recent country to visit? So, Guatemala.
Guatemala. I just got back a couple weeks ago. Oh man, they had amazing food. I love just how tortillas are served with every single meal, and the tamales that you can only get one day a week. And then I just love their caldos or their soups or meat stews that just are so nice and yummy.
No, why can you only get the tamales one day a week?
I don't know. It's so crazy, and they're really stubborn about it. They only sell them on Saturdays. And I actually arrived on a Sunday and I left Saturday morning, and we left very early on Saturday morning. And so we were struggling to find tamales at 5:00 in the morning because it's la ley, it's the law. You just cannot buy a tamale on any other day but Saturday in Guatemala, and people wait for it.
Okay, we got to get to the bottom of that, figure out why that is.
Yes.
If anybody knows, write me, put something in the comments.
It was funny because we had a Guatemalan a team member on our mission that hadn't been back to Guatemala since she was 2 years old when her family left. And she has been
Wow.
eating tamales her entire life, every single day of the week in the United States. And she's like, what
Yeah.
is this?
Ah, okay. What is your top airplane tip for traveling with a child?
um, Travel at night, definitely. I don't think I'd ever take Koa on anything more than like a 6 hour flight if it wasn't over, a red eye or a night flight for sure. And
Interesting.
I think I would also, I didn't even have them when Koa was little, and now I see, devices like iPads. You gotta take those with you on those trips.
But you didn't have them. I mean, I guess this was,
I did some I
7
did
years
some
ago.
awful flights. And so I mean, I've
Yeah,
had middle seat lap child, for like six
right.
hours. So I am gonna
Guess you just do it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
count back from
Okay.
100.
Do you have a favorite airport?
Airport.
Yeah,
Uh
airport.
oh man. I don't know.
Do you love airports like I do? I'm one of those weird people that I really like being in an airport.
I know. And I know why. You have a romantic story, don't you, that involves an
I
airport.
do. I'll have to tell that at some point, but
I do
no,
not
I
have
do
it.
like airports.
No, I am not a fan of airports. I do a lot of traveling to Latin America, to South America, and I almost always go through Miami, and I've come to like loathe the Miami airport. And I just traveled through Dallas when I went to Guatemala, and it was such a pleasure. And I can't believe I'm saying that about Texas. But as far as like getting through customs, and in Miami, there's like 10 lines that you have to go to. So you think you've made it, and you just like hit the back of another line, and it takes like literally all of your 2 hour layover just to get to like back to the gates, where it was not the case at all in
In
Dallas. It was
Dallas.
pretty
Yeah.
nice. It was really nice, but
Dallas, it seems like you walk forever in Dallas to go through customs. It's like a journey to get.
I know, but it went so
Like,
quick. There
yeah,
wasn't
it's
more than like,
pretty well organized,
yeah,
but
3 people in front of me at any given time. And yeah, it just was like painless. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't really love airports, to tell you the
okay.
truth.
Well, okay. Do you love street food? Do you eat street food?
I
Yes or
I
no?
do. I do eat street food. I think when in Rome, you have to eat street food, right?
Okay. What is your favorite word to say in your second language?
I tend to say así es la vida a lot, which just means like this is life.
Now, if someone gave you 200,000 flight miles that had to be used tomorrow, or actually it might have to be more than 200,000 because they keep raising the flight mile limits. But if someone gave you a lot of flight miles that had to be used tomorrow, where would you go and why?
I think I would go to Nepal again. I just went in December for the very first time, and I think it might be my favorite place I ever visited. I also
Really?
my husband is this like climber, and he's this avid climber, and I almost felt guilty being there without my family. I just felt like it was so beautiful, and it was such a like my entire family would love it, that I like I said, I almost felt guilty my entire trip. I wanted them both with me. So I think I would take
Yeah.
advantage of bringing them to this little treasure that I just want to share with them. But I have never been to Africa, and we do projects in Ghana and Tanzania and Kenya. And so if it was just me traveling solo, I would be really tempted to go to one of those places.
So, do you think you're going to get to go anytime
I
soon?
do. I think I'll probably be at least one. I was really close to going to Ghana, and it kind of rubbed up against Nepal, and I didn't get to
Yeah.
go, but I definitely see it in my future.
Cool. That's great. Now, if you were given magical powers to learn another language while you slept, what language would you choose?
Um, I would learn how to speak Creole. I think I lead a primary care program in Haiti, and I feel like I could do so more when I was in Haiti if I could speak Creole. I think Haitians are just such beautiful, kind, stunning people, and I feel like I'm losing such amazing opportunities to really understand the culture and the people and their needs without Creole. I would love to speak Creole.
Do you have a translator when you're down there?
We do. And DaVita Healthcare Partners is such a large company. We are so fortunate to have such diversity within the company that usually not only do we have local translators, but usually a good portion of my medical team is, can speak Creole or is from Haiti or another country that speaks Creole. And so, yeah, we do okay, but I when I go to a Spanish speaking country, it's so amazing just to be able to talk to the people that we serve and the local staff and just have a good understanding of be able to dialogue.
So it just makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
it does.
I feel like you're in handcuffs.
Yeah. Now, how many times have you been to Haiti?
Been twice, and I'm scheduled to go in June. So I went twice last year, once for the assessment and once for our first trip. And it seems like we'll be going back to the same clinic annually. So I'm excited about the next trip in early June.
Well, Katie, it's been so much fun just reconnecting with you and having you on today. I appreciate all your input and giving us all the information about what you're doing and what's happening around the world with your medical missions and things like that. And we will put notes to everything in the show notes for everyone. And thank you so much for joining us on the Global Mom Show today.
Thank you, Grace. It's been awesome being here and reconnecting with you. And I just love that you're doing this. It's a great opportunity. So thank you.
Thanks. Well, we'll talk again soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm Mary Grace Otis, and you can find me at theglobalmom.com. You'll also find show notes, articles, and more information about our guests. And you can follow me on Facebook at The Global Mom Show. Thanks for taking the time to listen today. If you like what you heard and would like to hear more, please take a minute right now to head over to iTunes and subscribe to this podcast. When you subscribe, it helps other people find the show more easily in iTunes, and it means you'll never miss an episode. And if you leave a review, well, that's even better. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can live a globally minded life wherever you are and teach your kids to do the same.